Ladies and gentlemen, it's important to begin by recognizing a profound and uncomfortable truth. In many marriages, what appears on the surface as love is actually control wearing a mask, and this is nowhere more evident than in the relationship between a narcissistic husband and his wife. It's a dynamic built not on mutual respect, not on shared values or vulnerability, but on domination. Subtle, strategic, and often invisible to those on the outside. The narcissistic husband doesn't enter the marriage offering love in the true sense. He offers something far more dangerous: the illusion of devotion. In the early stages, this can be incredibly deceiving. He is attentive, charming, perhaps even poetic. He speaks of destiny, of soulmates, of timeless connection. But behind this romantic intensity is a calculated strategy. He's not falling in love with her. He's studying her, measuring what she needs, what she fears, what she longs for, not to serve her, but to gain control over her. This is not courtship, it is conquest. Once he believes he has her, emotionally, psychologically, perhaps financially, the dynamic begins to shift. It's rarely sudden. It's incremental, subtle. He starts making decisions without consulting her. He criticizes small details, her tone or clothing, the way she laughs in public. He'll say it's because he cares, because he wants to help her grow. But what he's really doing is teaching her to doubt herself, teaching her that she cannot trust her own judgment, only his. This is where control replaces connection. And here lies the psychological sleight of hand. The narcissist will insist that his behavior is love, that his concern is protection, that his interference is guidance. And because the wife remembers the earlier charm, the attentiveness, the praise, the grand declarations, she begins to question her own growing discomfort. She tells herself he means well, that maybe she's overreacting, that if she just becomes a little more understanding, things will return to how they used to be. But they never do, because that earlier charm was a performance, and this quiet dominance is the real script. The narcissistic husband cannot tolerate autonomy in his partner. Why? Because to him, love is not a relationship between two whole people. It is a hierarchy, a stage. He needs to be the central character, the hero, the victim, the sage, depending on the moment. The wife is merely cast in supporting roles, required to adapt to his emotional script. Her dreams, her needs, her voice, they must be minimized so that it can fill the room. He may allow her some space, some freedom, but only if it makes him look good, if it fits the image he's building for the world. But control does not always appear violent or aggressive. In fact, the most insidious forms of control are quiet, soft-spoken, masked in concern. The husband may say, "I just don't think those friends are good for you," when what he really means is, "They might help you see who I really am." He might say, "I'm only telling you this because I care," while slicing at her self-esteem. Over time, she begins to shrink, not because he told her to, but because she's learned it's safer that way. Her world contracts, and with it so does her identity. Now here's where it becomes deeply tragic. The wife often starts to mistake this control for commitment. She believes that his jealousy means he cares, that his criticism is a form of guidance, that his rules are for her protection. She has been conditioned to equate emotional captivity with love. And this is not her fault. This is the result of repeated psychological reinforcement, the kind that rewires your sense of what is normal, what is deserved, what is love. But love, real love, does not demand obedience. It doesn't silence, it listens. It doesn't confine, it frees. Love is not control. It's risk. It's the willingness to let the other person be fully themselves, even if it challenges your comfort. A narcissistic husband cannot allow that, because at his core, he is terrified of irrelevance. He controls because he fears. He manipulates because he lacks the courage to truly connect. So, if you're in that place, if you're the one feeling smaller, quieter, less alive than you once were, ask yourself this: when did love start to feel like permission? When did safety become silence? Because love should not cost you your voice. And if it does, it was never love to begin with. If there's one defining trait that reveals the narcissistic husband beneath the surface, it is his pathological need to be superior, not just in the world at large, but especially within the walls of his own home. And to maintain that illusion of superiority, he must do something deeply corrosive. He must systematically erase his wife's identity. Not all at once, of course. The narcissist rarely kicks down the door. He doesn't need to. He operates with psychological precision, incrementally, carefully, until the woman he married is barely recognizable, not only to others, but to herself. Now, why would a man do this to the woman he claims to love? Because her strength threatens his control. Her independence reminds him of his fragility. Her rising confidence becomes a mirror he cannot bear to look into. You see, narcissism is not built on true self-worth. It's built on a brittle ego, one that must be constantly fed by external validation. And what's more threatening to a narcissist than a wife who does not orbit around him? A woman who thinks for herself, dreams for herself, lives for herself, not as an act of rebellion, but as an expression of her humanity, becomes an existential threat to the narcissistic illusion. So, what does he do? He chips away. At first, it might look like teasing, subtle jokes at her expense, dismissing her passions as cute or pointless, belittling her career, her talents, her ideas, especially in front of others where his insecurity feels most exposed. These aren't isolated comments. They are part of a deeper pattern of erosion, a campaign often unconscious to minimize her until he can dominate the space unchallenged. And it works, not because she is weak, but because he is strategic. He praises just enough to confuse her. He apologizes just enough to keep her hopeful. But every apology is followed by another dig, another jab, another reminder that she is not enough. Or worse, that she is too much, too ambitious, too emotional, too independent. He creates a paradox in her minding that to be loved, she must become less of who she is. This is where it becomes particularly insidious, because eventually she internalizes it. She starts self-censoring. She hesitates before speaking. She declines opportunities she once would have seized. She dresses to avoid his criticism. She shrinks, not because he told her to, but because she's been conditioned to believe that shrinking is safer than standing tall. And here's the deeper psychological truth. She's not just losing herself. She's being converted into an extension of him. That's what the narcissist ultimately wants. Not a wife, but a mirror. Someone to reflect back his inflated image. Someone to absorb his insecurities and never challenge them. Someone who will remain in the background while he performs his grandeur to the world. He doesn't want her to thrive. He wants her to orbit. And yet, he still expects her to fulfill all the emotional and domestic roles of a loving partner. He demands loyalty, devotion, admiration, but offers none of those in return unless they serve his self-image. In this twisted dynamic, love is not reciprocal. It's transactional, conditional, performance-based. And if she ever tries to reclaim her identity, to assert her needs, her boundaries, her voice, he reacts not with humility, but with hostility. He accuses her of being selfish, ungrateful, dramatic, because to him, her independence is not just inconvenient. It is betrayal. His ego cannot tolerate the presence of another strong self in the room. There can only be one star in the relationship, and it must be him. This isn't love. This is erasure. And yet many women stay, not because they are blind, but because they still believe the version of him they saw in the beginning, the man who once adored them. But here's the hard truth: that man was a mask. The real man is the one who cannot celebrate you when you shine. And so I say this, not with judgment, but with urgency. If someone only loves you when you are small, it's not love, it's possession. And no woman was born to be a reflection of someone else's fear. She was born to be a voice, her own. In the psychological theater of a narcissistic relationship, one of the most devastating acts is how a narcissistic husband weaponizes his wife's emotions against her. This is not just manipulation, it is a reprogramming of reality. It is a slow, methodical rewriting of her emotional map until she can no longer trust her own instincts, her own memory, her own truth. Now consider the emotional nature of a healthy relationship. In any secure bond, emotions serve a vital function. They are signals. They communicate needs, boundaries, desires, pain. They are how we say I'm hurt, or I need connection, or something is wrong. But in the narcissistic dynamic, these signals are intercepted, distorted, and thrown back at the woman with weaponized force. The message is clear: your emotions are not safe here, and it begins innocently enough. The wife may express sadness. She may feel neglected. Maybe she's upset after a dismissive remark or feels overwhelmed by the emotional distance. But instead of being met with empathy, or even basic human regard, she is told she's overreacting, too emotional, too sensitive. Suddenly, the conversation is no longer about her pain, it's about her problem. The shift is subtle, but the effect is profound. The original hurt is never addressed. Instead, it's used as evidence against her. This is the first fracture, the point where she starts to doubt her right to feel what she feels. And once that seed of doubt is planted, the narcissist nurtures it with precision. He begins to reframe every emotional expression as a form of weakness or manipulation. If she cries, she's being dramatic. If she's angry, she's irrational. If she sets a boundary, she's accused of being cold, distant, even abusive. He will twist the narrative until she's the villain in her own story. And here's the paradox: The more she tries to explain herself, the more he uses her explanation as proof that she's unstable. This is what we call gaslighting. And it's not just a buzzword. It's a deep form of psychological warfare. It's the steady erosion of someone's sense of truth. Over time, she starts to ask herself, maybe I am overreacting, maybe I'm broken, maybe I do expect too much. And once she internalizes that script, the narcissist no longer has to silence her. She begins to silence herself. He has taught her not to trust her emotions. And once you remove trust in one's emotional compass, what you create is dependency. She becomes dependent on him to interpret reality. She looks to him to confirm if what she's feeling is valid. And of course, he will always interpret it in a way that keeps him in control. That is the real strategy, not just to control the environment, but to control her internal experience of the environment. And yet, he will still demand that she be emotionally available to him. He expects her to soothe his moods, regulate his ego, offer affection on demand, even when she's running on emotional fumes. That is the cruel irony. He will accuse her of emotional instability while feeding off her emotional labor. Her empathy becomes the very fuel he burns to maintain his illusion of superiority. This is not just emotional imbalance. This is psychological theft, because he is stealing her most human qualities, her sensitivity, her openness, her vulnerability, and turning them against her like knives. And the longer it continues, the more she begins to disconnect from herself. She no longer knows what she wants, what she needs, what she believes. Her emotional world becomes a battlefield where she is both the wounded and the accused. And perhaps most chilling is this: when she finally breaks, when the pain, the confusion, the invalidation reach their peak and she finally erupts, he stands back and points at her and says, "See, this is why I can't talk to you. This is why you're the problem." The entire emotional cycle becomes a trap, rigged from the beginning to end, with only one outcome: her collapse and his vindication. But here's the truth, and I say this with every ounce of clarity I can offer: your emotions are not the enemy. They are not flaws. They are not signs of weakness. They are your internal compass, and anyone who teaches you to distrust them is not protecting you. They are controlling you. If someone uses your heart as a weapon, they were never aiming for love. They were aiming for power. One of the most sinister features of a narcissistic husband's behavior is his ability to play the victim while actively being the abuser. This inversion of roles isn't just manipulative. It's psychologically disorienting. It causes the wife to question not only her perceptions of the relationship, but her very grasp on reality. And that's the point. The narcissist's greatest weapon isn't his aggression. It's his ability to rewrite the narrative, to cast himself as the wounded hero and his wife as the source of the chaos he, in fact, creates. Now think about that for a moment. In a healthy relationship, when conflict arises, both partners assume some level of responsibility. There's a shared effort to understand, repair, and evolve. But in a narcissistic dynamic, the rules are very different. The narcissist cannot afford to be wrong. Being wrong threatens his identity. Being at fault threatens the carefully constructed image he's built, not just for the world, but for himself. And so, when confronted, even gently, he deflects, denies, and projects. He doesn't respond with introspection. He responds with injury. He becomes the victim of your tone, the victim of your timing, the victim of how you made him feel. Suddenly, the issue at hand, perhaps something he did or failed to do, vanishes. It's no longer about your pain. It's about his. And now you are on the defensive. You're apologizing for how you said something, for how upset you got, for how your emotions triggered him. This reversal is not a misunderstanding. It is a tactic. This isn't just gaslighting. This is narrative hijacking. The narcissistic husband has an uncanny ability to rewrite every emotional moment in a way that shields him from accountability and places the blame squarely on the shoulders of his wife. And over time, she begins to accept this rewritten script. She internalizes the guilt. She starts to believe that maybe she is too critical. Maybe she is too sensitive. Maybe he really is just doing his best and she's expecting too much. But make no mistake, this is not humility on her part. It's survival. Because when a narcissist plays the victim, he doesn't just seek sympathy. He demands it. He uses his pain, real or exaggerated, as a shield against criticism and a sword against anyone who challenges him. He may cry. He may act wounded. He may bring up his past traumas, his stresses, his fears. Anything to divert attention away from the harm he's doing in the present. And because his wife is often empathetic, because she still hopes for the man she once thought she married, she falls into the trap of comforting the very person who is harming her. This creates an emotional loop that is profoundly damaging. The wife gets hurt, she speaks up, he turns it around. She doubts herself, she comforts him. She represses her needs. And the cycle begins again. The tragedy is that the more compassion she shows, the more it gets used against her. Her empathy becomes a liability. Her forgiveness becomes fuel for further abuse. Because he knows she will always give him the benefit of the doubt, even when he's given her every reason not to. And perhaps the most dangerous aspect of this behavior is how well it plays in public. To friends, family, even therapists, the narcissistic husband presents as composed, misunderstood, even gentle. He's charming, articulate, self-deprecating, just enough to seem humble. He might even say things like, "I know I'm not perfect," or "I just want to be better for her." And yet behind closed doors, he continues the same patterns, minimizing, invalidating, controlling. The wife is left not only isolated but disbelieved. And that's the final layer of psychological imprisonment, when the outside world sees the mask and not the monster. She begins to wonder if she is the one losing touch with reality. But she's not. She's seeing the truth he spends every waking moment trying to conceal. So here's what must be said, plainly and without apology. A man who cannot take responsibility for his actions, who turns every confrontation into a performance of his own suffering, is not a partner. He is a parasite on your empathy.